Okay, good morning. Let's begin. We'll back up a little to about 12 lines up from the bottom of 75b. We'll finish that nice chunk of Haggadah, and now we continue with more about um, how to acquire something, in particular a ship. Itmar, we said, Sfina, if you have a ship, Rav Amar, Kevan Shemashach Kol Shehu, you like Mashicha is a way to a ship is metaltalin, is considered metaltalin, like any other movable object. And Mashicha pulling it is Kona, acquires it. So pull the ship a little bit and you've acquired it. Shmuel Amar, Lo Kana Achi Yimshach Kula. You have to pull it the full ship length. In other words, the rear of the ship has to get to the point where the front of the ship was. Lema Tanai. Maybe this is a similar to a machlokas Tanai. Ketzad b'msira. Brisa says, how are you kona something through masira, handing over something, right? If you give the handle of something to a buyer or to the recipient, then his taking the handle acquires it, even if there hasn't been Mashiach, even if he hasn't moved it. So how is this kinyan accomplished? This Masira. Achaza betalfa, besara, beukaf shela. If you grab an animal by its hoof or by its hair or by its saddle, b'shlif shela, or whatever bundle is strapped onto it, beprumbia shabafia, or the bit in its mouth, bezusha betzavara, or the bell on its neck. Kana. These are all handles, as it were, for the animal. And so once you grasp that, you take control of that, even if you haven't moved the animal, that's Masira. Okay, Ketzad b'Mashicha, and the Brisa says, how do you, are you kind of something with Mashicha, with pulling it? Korolav hiba, even if you don't physically touch it, but you call it and it comes to you, so you've caused it to move. Oshe kisha b'makel v'ratzalafanav, or you hit it with a stick and it runs away or it moves. Kevin she'akra yad v'regel, as soon as it lifts one front leg and one rear leg, kana, then you're kana it. That's moving it. Rabbi Achi v'yamar Rav Achai Omer, Rav Achi or Rav Achai said, Ad shetahalich malo kamasa. No, it has to walk a full body length. That has to actually move. Lifting up the feet is not sufficient. It has to move a full body length. Well, that sounds like the ship, right? Lema Rav the America Tanakama. So maybe Rav says like the who says that it just has to lift a foot is like the ship just moving a little bit, and Shmuel Damar Krabi Achai, and Shmuel who says that you have to move the ship the whole ship length would be like Rabbi Achai who says you have to move the animal the whole animal length. Sounds reasonable. Amar Charav, but Gemara says not necessarily. Rav could say Anod Amar Afilu Rabbi Achai. I could say with regards to the animal, I could say it has to move a full body length, and still say about the ship that it only has to move a little bit. Why? Kind of look on Rabbi Yachai. Rabbi Yacha is his statement that the animal has to move a full length. Ela b'Bali that only applies to animals. Diafagav to akra yad v'regel. Because what's the other option? You're going to say the other view was as soon as it lifts a foot and a leg. Well, it hasn't moved yet, right? It's lifted its foot, but it hasn't moved. So that's why I say it has to move. Now it's a little unclear, like why you would say it has to move the whole body length, but you can't really accord this argument with the argument about the animals. A ship came into Puerta. Once it moves a little bit, no, the whole thing has moved, right? It's not like the back of the ship hasn't moved if it hasn't gotten to the place where the front of the ship was. The ship moves as a unit, so if it just moves an inch, then that should be Mashicha. Shmuel Amar, and Shmuel could say, Anadi Amri Afili Katanakama. Even though I say about the ship, it has to move a full length, I could say that about an animal, I could agree with the Tanakama that it can just lift a foot or 2 feet. Tanakama. Why is that sufficient for the animal? Because it's alive. Once it's picked up its feet, it's like it's unleashed the potential somehow. Like the other feet are ready to move also. Okay, so it's like the kind of a prelude to moving. You know, you could say that that is considered moving, but the ship doesn't have anything like that. Either you move it or you don't move it. That doesn't like you've started it moving. It started the potential for it to move. It's not a balkai. Okay, so that's not exactly corresponding to the dispute about the ship. Let's try a different one. Lema kanik tanai. Maybe it's a
Yes,
different
Lema,
Machokas
yes.
story. The Tanya. Sfina niknes b'mshicha. Another Brisa says a boat can be acquired through pulling it. Rav Nosson Amar Sfina va'osios niknos b'mshicha. Rav Nosson says a ship or osios, letters. So apparently this means like an IOU. Okay, so you have a document that's an IOU. How do you take control of it? How do you like? I could sell you my IOU, right? I owe money to somebody else. I could sell you that note, or somebody else owes money to me. So I have the IOU. I could sell that to you, and then you're now the creditor. So how do you acquire that? Like just a ship, and this IOU can be acquired through Mashicha, through pulling it, Ubishtar, and with a contract. Okay. So first of all, Osios Mandachar Shmei. Why are we talking about like these IOUs? Where does that come from? So Chasuri Mechzer Vachitani. The Gemara says this is how we read the Brisa. Sfina niknes Mashicha. You can acquire a boat through Mashicha. Va'osios b'Masira, and an IOU through Masira, through like taking the handle of it. I'm not sure what that would look like, right? But imagine, like, remember how newspapers used to be displayed in a library. They'd have these long wooden things, and the newspaper was threaded through it, and it had a handle on each end. So that, in my mind's eye, that's the handle for a document. Okay, so these IOUs can be acquired. You don't even have to move them. You just have to take hold of the handle. Rabbi Nassan Omer. Rav Nosson says, and this is continuing to read the Brisa, Sfina ve'osios niknas b'mshicha uvishtar. Rav Nosson says you don't have to distinguish between a boat and an IOU. Both the boat and an IOU can be acquired through Mashicha, through moving it, and through a shtar. Shtar was phenomenally. So Gemara says, well, like, what's the point of sorry, he's saying it's both. It has to be acquired by both Mashicha and through a contract. So Charlotte's feeling lonely, but why would that apply to a boat? A boat is like any metaltalin. You don't need a contract to buy a movable object. You just need to hand over the money and do an act of kinyan like Mashicha. So what do you need the shtar for? No, we're going to read it again differently. Here's how to read the brisa. A boat can be acquired through mashicha, through pulling it. V'yosios b'msira, and an IOU through taking the handle. Rabbi Nassan Omer sfina b'mashicha v'yosios b'shtar. And Rav Nassan says, no, not quite. He says yes, a boat can be acquired through pulling it, but an IOU has to be acquired through a shtar, through a contract. So this way, so there's, when it comes to shtar, it's not talking about the ship at all. Okay, so Sfina Mishicha. Now, anyway, it turns out, what is this Brisa saying? That a boat can be acquired through Mashicha, through pulling it. Hainu Tanakama, it's the same as the Tanakama. He's not saying anything different. Ela Deravu Shmuel could be now. Maybe we're talking about, what are they arguing about? Like, what is Rav Nassan adding to the Tanakama? He's saying yes, Mashicha, but maybe they have a different view on how much Mashicha is required, and maybe that's the machlokas of Rav and Shmuel, right? Rav says just move it a little, and Shmuel says a full boat length. Maybe that's the difference between Tanakama and Rav Nassan. Rav says, no, I don't buy that. You could hold both the Tanakama and Rav Nachman could hold either like Rav or like Shmuel. Like it's not relevant. How much Mashicha is not a relevant point here. They're actually talking about Mashicha or not Mashicha. It was so really, Rav Nassan and Tanakama agree that a sfina, a boat, a ship is metaltalin. Mashicha is enough. You don't need you don't need a contract. What are they arguing about? Yeah, so they're agreeing. Rav Nosson is agreeing with the Tanna Kama about the Sfina, but he's saying, you know what? I disagree with you about the IOU. This is what Rav Nosson is saying. The Sfina Valer Ben Dinalach. I agree with you about the ship, that it's Mashicha is how you acquire both. Yes, but regarding the IOU, Ikashtar in Ilalo. I require not only Mashicha, but also a star, whereas the Tanna Kama doesn't require a star. And what are they arguing about? Like whether you need a star or not for Osios, for an IOU. The Tanya, we have a brisa. Osios niknos b'mesira. An IOU can be purchased through grabbing the handle. Divrei Rabbi. V'chachamim omrim ben kasav v'lo masar, ben masar v'lo kasav, lo kana. You need both, right? If you wrote a contract but you didn't take hold of it, then that's not a sufficient kinyan. Or if you took hold of it without a contract, also not a sufficient kinyan. So you have to do both. In this brisa, Rabbi says that you need only one of these acts, and the rabbis say you need both. So maybe that's maybe that's parallel to the Tanna Kama and Rav Nosson that we just saw, right? So Gemara says, wait a minute, B'mayu Kimta. Karabi, what are you saying about the Tanna Kama? You're saying he's like Rabbi, right? That Rabbi says either one or the other. Sfina name tikne b'msira. If that's the case, then like then why are you restricting the kinyan of a ship to Mashicha? Should also be acquired through Masira. The Tanya, as we have another brisa, Tzvina niknes Masira divir Rabbi. Rabbi says that that Masira, that handing something over, grabbing the handle, is enough for acquiring a boat. The rabbis say no, you actually need Mashicha. You have to pull it. Oh, or you can acquire it, like maybe it's a big ship, it's not so easy to move. It's anchored in place and you can't, it's too big for you to move it. Another strategy is you can purchase the yard where it's sitting. I mean, so it's a little unclear to me. I mean, we're going to see, like, the Gemara is imagining that this is a dry dock ship, I think. So you can purchase the yard on which it is sitting, and then you can be kona it through chatzar, through kinyan chatzar, that's on your property.
Wait, in the beginning, once in the beginning, machloket regarding how far they moved the ship. So we keep saying Mashicha, but initially it was Mashicha 2 inches or Mashicha the whole ship, the length of the ship.
Right. So we're saying there's different when we encounter similar arguments in the other brises, it could be we're talking not how much, but whether or not, right? Like and you could take either view about how much Mashicha, right? So the fact that one says, the one is more liberal in terms of allowing the kinyan to take place, and one is less liberal about it. It's not necessarily that they're arguing over how much Mashicha. They're arguing over the fact of Mashicha. Is Mashicha good or not? So we could agree either that Mashicha is just a little bit or Mashicha is a full boat length. We could agree that that's the definition of Mashicha. What we're arguing about is Mashicha enough for a ship? Right?
Wasn't that the Machlochet Tanaim in the beginning? How far is the Mashicha? A few inches?
Yeah. So that's correct. That's correct. But we're trying to set this up as the same argument as other Tanaitic arguments. But we're saying no, these other arguments are not necessarily about how much Mashicha. It could be about whether Mashicha works at all for the ship. Okay, so in this case, we're saying, okay, so we're saying, let's back up a little bit, to the bottom of Amud Aleph, third line, B'mayu Kimta, how are you understanding the Tanna Kama of the the other brisa Rebbe, like Rebbe, that you just have to move it a little bit. So Svina Name Tikna B'Msira, then like you're agreeing that a ship can be acquired through Masira. You're just saying like how much. Sorry, it should also be acquired through Masira, through taking hold of the handle, as we said in another brisa. The Tanya Svina Niknis Masira Divu Rabbi V'Chamim Lokana Achim Shechena or Achis Kars Makama. That Rabbi is the one who says that Masira is a good thing for a ship. So you can't say that the Tanakama agrees with Rabbi, because the Tanakama requires Mashicha, not Masira. And we know from this other source that Rabbi allows Masira also. Whereas says Lokasha. No, that's not a problem. Rabbi could actually say that Masira works for a ship, and he could be the one that the Tanakama is quoting to say that you need Mashicha, right? How so? Khan in this where Rabbi says you need Masira Bishus Arabi. When do you need Masira? Maybe he's talking about if it's in public property. Khan Bisimta, but maybe if it's in an alley, which is um it's like it's only a semi-public place. It could be considered private property. So then you need more than Masira. You need Mashicha. Okay. And that's why Rabbi says so. Ordinarily in Rishus Harabim, no, in Rishus Harabim, Rabbi says, yeah, you need that Masira is okay. But in a private property where maybe because it's considered on someone else's land, on your land, his land, whatever it is, then then Masira is not sufficient. You have to make a stronger kinyan to establish your ownership. But there's an obvious problem with this, because as the Gemara will say, the Bryce also said until you do Mashicha, or you rent I said bought, but really the Gemara says you rent the place that it's sitting on, right? So came to Raisa. So you're saying that the second Brisa where Rabbi says you need Masira, Masira is enough, Rishus Harabim. That's you're saying is in the public domain. So Ema Seifa, but what about the end? V'chachamim omrim lo kanad shim shechena. The rabbi said you have to do Mashicha. V'rishus harabim, and if it is in the public property, miman ogir. They also gave you they also gave the option of renting the land on which it sits to make a kinyan chatzar. But how can you rent public property? You can only rent property from an individual, right? V'tu, so clearly they're not talking about public property. V'tu, and also Mashicha Rishus Harabim Mikanya. Like, does Mashicha even work in public property? V'Abai v'Rava Demar Tavaru Masira Kona Rishus Harabim Ubachaser Sheina Shel Shneim. Abai and Rava both say that Masira, taking hold of the handle, that can be a kinyan in the public domain, or in a third party's private property. Mashicha Kona B'Simta. But if it is a property that is owned either by the buyer or the seller, then you need Mashicha. You need a stronger kinyan. Or also if it's a shared property, if it's used by both of them, by both the buyer and the seller, then you need Mashicha. Lifting something, that's the strongest kinyan that you can do anywhere, any public property, private property, whatever. So they both agree that Mashicha is not sufficient in a public property. So going back to our brisa, which says, you can rent the property. You can't be talking about public property, and so how can you say that the brisa is talking about public property?
So why would Masira be Kona in B'Shut Rabim? I mean, isn't that
Rishus
but it's
Harabim is
still
an
not owned
easier.
by anybody?
Yeah, so the idea is that Rishus Harabim is an easier place to do a kinyan, right? Because no one has any claim on it. any particular ownership claim on the area, right? When you're talking about a private property, you need to do something more significant because it's not your property, right? It's somebody else's property. So just doing, the minor act of Kinyan of Masira, that's not sufficient to exercise control, right? Because it's in someone's property. So you need to do something more significant to demonstrate your control of the object. Okay, so in Rishus Harabim, you need only the smallest exercise of control. In a private domain, you need a stronger exercise of control. Does that make sense?
Well, you need in a private property, one would need to acquire it from the person who owns it in that property. You can't just go into someone else's, the third party's property and say, I'm going to acquire this boat and then
No,
and
why not? If I'm buying it from you, you
if
agree
you're
to the
buying right,
transaction.
if you're right, but that's from the owner of that property. But if the two
Okay,
people are
imagine the
negotiating
ship is
that,
still in the shipyard,
what's
right?
that?
Imagine the ship is still in the shipyard where it was built by a third party, okay? Um, and then, I paid for the ship to be built, so it's mine, right? And I want to sell it to you. It's still in the shipyard, which is a third party's property. Can't I sell it to you? Of course I can. It's not like the owner of the third party owner is objecting to it. But we're saying since it's on someone else's property, I have to do a more significant act of control. Like there's nobody's trying to trick anybody here, right? It's a
Right.
legal sale. Everybody agrees what's going on here, but you have to exercise a kinyan. And how strong does the kinyan have to be? That depends. If it's in public property, it's only you only have to do a minor act of control. But if it's in someone's property, then you have to do something more significant. Does that
But
make sense?
well, the person who owns the shipyard has to agree that both parties can make
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah. There's
opinion
no
there.
disputes. There's no disputes here. Everybody is happy with all the transactions going on here. Okay, we're not talking about proving ownership. We're talking about exercising ownership, like formalizing the ownership, taking control. So there's no disputes here,
Hmm.
right? Everybody's happy with what's going on. The shipbuilder who owns the yard is happy because he sold the ship, right? Because he built a ship for me. I'm happy because I got you to buy the ship from me. You're happy because you paid me for the ship and you wanted the ship. Everybody's happy.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so the Gemara is going to reinterpret the Brisa again. My Achim Shechana Nami Dekam, or when it says that you require Meshicha, Umay Ashi Iskaras Mekama Dekam, and when it says, or if you rent the place where it's resting, this is what it means. Achim Shechana Reshus Harabim Lusimta, until like what you have to do is do Mashicha from the public domain into this semi-private domain. And if it's the seller's domain that you're pulling it into and not a third party, then you also need to rent the place that it's sitting on. Okay, so you could say that both these brisas are according to Rabbi. He holds that Masira works in the public domain, and in this private property, you need Mashiach. Okay. I should point out, just to confuse things a little, that when it's not really talking about a private domain, it's talking about a semi-private domain. Apparently, the way I understand it, the public street is a busy place, and it's hard to do a transaction about a ship. I mean, it's hard to imagine like what's going on here, but so you pull the guy aside into a quieter corner, like the sidewalk cafe, which is on public property, and that's a good place to negotiate and to engage in transactions. So it's not really private property, but it's seen for this purpose as kind of semi-private. Um, just as an aside, but it's easier to just refer to the distinction between public and private. So I kind of elided over that.
But he's doing Mashicha from Rishut Rabbim to the Simta, right? He's bringing it and then he completes the transaction. Is that it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
So he is doing Mashicha in the public place.
yes, right. Right, but we're also saying that if the simta is the property of you used Mashicha to pull it into the seller's property, then you also have to rent that property for the purpose of doing the kinyan. Okay, now
So there is
um
Mashiach in the public place.
yes.
And where was before we said there was no Mashiach in the public place.
Right. So there's all these different views we're dealing with, right? So that what we're saying is that we can say that Rebbe holds that you need Mashiach. Masira is not enough for the ship in the public place. You need Mashiach, but also if the Mashiach is pulling it into this private simta that belongs to the seller, then that even Mashiach is not sufficient. Because look where you've pulled it into. You've pulled it into his domain, into the seller's domain. So in that case, you also need to rent that place from him.
So would he
So that
then hold that Mashiach in the public place by itself would not be adequate? It has to be
ordinarily it would,
Mashiach.
but if what the Mashiach accomplishes is pulling it into the seller's domain, then you can see the problem, right? Yeah, you exercise control over it to bring it into the seller's domain, right? Well, what kind of control is that? You're kind of almost acting as his agent to bring it into his control. So that's why you have to take control of the lot where it's sitting, so that it's as if it were your property that you're pulling it into, and not the seller's property.
But in the public domain, the Mashiach Rabin by itself, Mashiach would not be effective, right? Isn't that what we
Yeah,
learned?
it would. It would, with the exception of if that Mashiach takes it into the seller's property,
Oh,
then that's a negating factor, right? Sure, Mashiach is good. Mashiach works in Rishus Harabim, but it doesn't work when you pull it from Rishus Harabim into the seller's property. Then you, as the buyer, have not done yourself any good.
I thought we were learning that Mashiach in the public domain did not work because how can you own the public domain? And with Mashiach, whereas Masira would work in the public domain.
No, Masira is weaker. So Masira would work in the public domain, and
Right.
but Reb no, but Rebbe, but that's the Chachamim. Rebbe said no, you need Mashiach even in the public domain. That was the dispute in that brisa.
Oh, so Rebbe said,
Yeah, I don't agree with you that Masira is enough. You need Mashiach. But when Mashiach isn't enough, if you're pulling it into the private domain of the seller, then you also need Schira.
but the Chachamim said Masira
The
was enough.
Chachamim say, yeah, you don't even need Mashiach. Masira is enough. Once you take the handle of it, you're good. And that took place in public property. So then you moved it into the seller's property. It doesn't matter. You were already kona with Masira, according
But
to
so
Chachamim.
they were saying that Masira, Mashiach wouldn't because who owns the public property, right? Isn't that part of the argument?
Yeah, but
Because
in the
they
public
wouldn't be
property,
allowed to.
everybody has equal rights. So first we thought it meant that you have to rent the public property, but that doesn't make any sense.
Exactly, right.
So now that's why we're explaining it like this. Like you can be kona with, according to the Chachamim, with Masira in public property. That's fine. Rebbe says, no, it's not enough. You need Mashiach. Okay. But when Mashiach isn't enough, if you pull it into the seller's property, then you also need Schira.
So he would hold that Rebbe would hold that you, in a sense, can rent public property, or you can that it's all open to everybody. So Mashiach would be good enough in
Yes,
public.
that's right.
Okay.
Okay. Lema Abaye v'Rabba Diamri Karabi. Now, let's say that Abaye and Rabba, we saw before that, what did they say? They said both of them agreed. Let me look back so I don't get this wrong. Um, um, what did Abaye and Rabba say? Sorry. Oh yeah. So Abaye both said Mesira Koner B'Shus Rabim, Uvachas Hashem Yosheim, Meshicha Koner B'Simta. Okay, so maybe Abai and Rava agree with Rabbi, right? Because Rabbi is saying that you need Mashiach. And 1 second. Just a second, let's see if I get this right. Okay. I stated that incorrectly. I apologize. So the Chachamim would say that Mesira is not enough in Rishus Harabim. You need Mashicha, and it's Rabbi who says, and you not only there's a case where you not only need Mashicha, you also need Schira. Okay, so um, so
Or Masira. Rebbe also says Masira is right. Didn't he say?
right, and that's what right. Masira is enough in Rishus Harabim because you're done, right? Once you've taken the handle, it doesn't matter if you then take it into the Simta, right? Into private domain, right? Because and so right, so I think I stated it a little bit backwards. But Abai and Rava appear to agree with Rebbe because they say, like Rebbe, um, that that Masira is enough, right? In public property. Amar Ravashi. Ravashi says not so fast. Ida Amar le hachiname. If it's the seller who's saying to the buyer, "Okay, I sell you the ship. Thank you for the check. Go and do a kinyan." Then um, even the Chachamim would say that Masira is enough. When do they say it's not enough? Where the seller specifies, you know what you have to do? You give me the check, now go do a kinyan of Mashicha specifically. Marsavar Kapeda, Marsavar Mar Makom Hulo. The rabbis hold that that's a condition of sale, and Rebbe holds that he's just like suggesting, right? He says, "Oh, you need to do a kinyan now, go pull it." Right, but it's not necessarily, according to Rebbe, that's not a condition of sale. He's just instructing him, like, or helping him out, like, oh, you know how you do a kinyan, go pull it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other ways to make the kinyan. Whereas the rabbis would say that no, if he says go make a kinyan mashicha, then that's a condition of sale. Okay, I think this is a good place to stop for today. We'll pick it up here tomorrow.
So in the end, we're saying Rebbe holds by Masira. And the Chachamim are the ones
In
that hold
Rishus
that the
Harabim, right,
Mashiach. In Meshut Rabbim,
right,
the
right, right.
Chachamim hold that you need Masir and Mashiach and Meshut Rabbim.
Yeah, well, Mashicha, like you don't even need Masira. Like Mashicha could include Masira, but not necessarily. Like we saw that Mashicha could be if you call an animal to come to you, so you're not actually grasping it. But it can often include Masira, taking a handle, but that's not a necessary part of it.
So Mashiach would be sufficient,
Yeah.
even in Meshut Rabbim.
Yes.
So then, who is the one?
But Rabbi says unless the Mashicha is taking it out of Rishus Harabim and into the seller's simta,
So
then you also need schira.
then or Shchira. But so who? So then we're going back to this. Who was the one who held that? Who stated that Mashiach and Meshut Rabbim wouldn't work because you can't own public property.
So
And
we're reinterpreting that. We're saying that the schira is not about renting the public property. What we're saying is in Rishus Harabim, this is a rule. But if there's if in the course of doing that Mashicha, you're taking it into private property, then you also need schira of the private property. So the schira never had to do with Rishus Harabim, obviously. I mean, that was the Gemara's objection. Like, how can you say this is talking about Rishus Harabim if it's if you're talking about schira? And the answer is, yeah, I was talking about Rishus Harabim. The schira I was talking about is if you take it from Rishus Harabim into Rishus Hayachid, into the Simta, that's when I was talking about schira.
so, but who was the one who brought up that point? Was that the Rebbe or the Chachamim that it?
Well, it wasn't
How can
clear
you
in the
Rebbe?
language of the Mishnah of the Brisa, but what we're interpreting is that it's Rebbe who added that. It says that,
Well,
like,
yeah,
what
that I
about if
understand. But that Rebbe added that once you bring it into private property, you need Mashiach, and that's the case of Mashiach, and you need Masira there as well, and you need Schira there as well.
right?
But who raised the that was the Gemara that raised the question, how can you rent public property?
Yes, right. So in other words, like, how do I understand this price? Or what are you talking about? Like, you can't be talking about renting because we're talking about Rishus Rabim. And so then the Gemara said, oh, you know what the price means? It means renting not the Rishus Rabim. It means renting the Simta that you dragged it into. That's the
Right,
renting we're
okay.
talking about.
But in the Bright, who was the one who initially held that the thought that you might have to rent the public property? Was that Rebbe?
No, no, that's what the Gemara is saying. Nobody thought that.
I
That
see.
wouldn't make any sense.
Right.
Right?
Okay.
That's why you have to reinterpret what Rabbi was saying about the renting. He wasn't talking about renting public property. Nobody thinks you can rent public property. When he said renting, he was talking about pulling it from the public property into private property that you then have to rent.
Okay.
Okay, good.
A little
Okay, well,
confusing, little confusing that, but
yeah, no kidding. Okay, we'll pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day.
okay, good day.